"We have to work together," Garges said easily as he suddenly entered Eugene's room, in middle of the night. Eugene was irritated by that because Garges came in and woke him, who had just been sleeping, just to say that he didn't care, because he wanted to hear Eugene's answer. Then Eugene said that Garges had heard about the blood succession ritual from the family leader. They would all enter from different places. So how could they work together? Garges answered that, although the entry points are different, the goal is the same in the center of the boss monster. The twins of the main house will also cooperate. Conclusion: Garges wanted them to gather in the middle and fight the boss monsters together. Eugene said that he was sure he could beat him alone. Desiree, who was there, scoffed that Eugene was arrogant, although she admitted that Eugene was indeed strong, but if Eugene helped them, they would be able to defeat the boss monster. Eugene asked Desiree why she is so eager to kill the boss monster. Then Desiree replied that in the bloodline succession ritual where the main bloodline and branch bloodline participate, the branch bloodline never wins at all, but this time they have a chance. Meanwhile at Anisola's place, she was thinking about the Red Tower Master, who was invited to the bloodline succession ritual that might have come to take Iode his apprentice, because from a young age, Iode preferred reading books. He also has an interest in magic and learns it bit by bit. If Iode might end up becoming the Red Tower Master's apprentice, he would have no other choice but to temporarily leave the main house, during which time Cyan and Seal would continue to thrive, and if that happened, it would be tantamount to Iode giving up his position as the next are the bloodline succession ritual. According to CatZilla, her children will continue to live with a bad outlook because they were born from a second wife, even though once they manage to maintain their position, they will stand confidently. However, on the one hand CatZilla remembers about Eugene because that child's talent is extraordinary and could end up embarrassing the entire main family. 3 days later the bloodline succession ritual finally started. 9 children had gathered in front of the labyrinth gate. There were also Gillard and Robrian, and then before starting, Robrian gave them magic light and let them mold their own choice weapons. They can made weapon what they wanted. First Seal create a sword. She was very happy, she waved her sword to check. Then Robrian give them advice how to mold their weapon. After that Garges mold a big sword, Desiree mold a spear, Cyan and Iode made a sword as well as 3 branch children, and last Eugene made a shield and a sword. When he was finished, Seal asked Eugene if he met in the labyrinth, would he attack them. Then Eugene even asked leader, are they allowed to attack? Gillard replied that, of course, the competition was the essence of the bloodline succession ritual, but in the bloodline succession ritual, quick decisions and cooperation also important because they have the blood of the Lionheart family. After all, we are family. After that Seal looked forward to Eugene with a creepy smile. Eugene doesn't care. After that Robrian gave them a magic locket and asked them to wear it around their neck. They all wear it. The necklace was connected to their consciousness. If they felt a strong pressure inside the labyrinth, the necklace would react. When that happened, the Robrian would decide it was a dangerous situation and step in. Eugene thought that the necklace was just a precaution. Robrian says if they feel like they can't conquer the maze, they need to squeeze the gem in the necklace and shout help me, that way they would be able to leave the labyrinth. After the explanation was finished, Robrian asked them to go inside the cave, which was the gateway to the labyrinth, and even if they entered from the same gate, they would be in a different place. The 9 of them enter one by one into the labyrinth. Eugene step in the labyrinth and remembers that he roamed the labyrinth in his previous life until he got bored. Then Eugene looked at the closed top of the labyrinth, then looked at the walls on each side and swings his sword so their movement would be limited. It would be very difficult to equip weapons with a wide range of attacks. Which is why he chose a sword and shield. That combination can overcome any situation because this labyrinth is made for children, so the level of difficulty is clear. In the labyrinth the children met a slime monster. There was a child who panicked so that he lost to the soft monster and was immediately picked up by Sir Robrian. In 1 hour after the start of the bloodline succession ceremony, when 3 children had been declared failures and taken out of the labyrinth, With the cold face, leader ordered the 3 children to rest, then Sir Gilliard Lionheart and Sir Reborn returned to their seats to watch over the other children who were still trying to survive in the maze. First, Gargus looks very agile when at full power against the goblin. It's wanting a swing of his large sword but stuck on the wall. With brute force he managed to get rid of 2 small goblins. Even though this brat was a bit clumsy, he could push the opponent so hard. Then there's Desiree, who has to face slime monsters in her path. This girl was so agile when she dodged the monster. This little girl tried to stab one of the slime monsters with her spear but failed. She realized that slime monsters were hard to fight with sharp weapons. So Desiree decided to just run away from the monster. She focused on advancing and getting through the labyrinth besides avoiding fights as much as possible. On the other side, Cyan, which seemed to be very careful in his steps, before the ceremony started, so he and Seal had studied the map, so they wouldn't run into any problems or obvious. Then Cyan picked up a rock to throw in front of him, thereby triggering the trap. Only after the trap failed, he ran down the hall. Because of his vigilance he was able to keep himself out of the trap and Cyan's performance wasn't too bad to clear the passage. Then there is Seal, who has to face a goblin monster. This girl managed to avoid the attack and then counter-attack the monster until it was destroyed. Then she continued walking with a broad smile. Unfortunately this girl had to meet a dead end. On the other hand, there was Sir Gillard's first son Iode. When facing goblins the boy was actually amazed because he saw a monster made of magic until he was surprised that the monster attacked him. Luckily Iode managed to defend off the monster's attack, then attack back until the goblin dead. It was defeated. Sir Reborn comments that Iode has an affinity for magic. The father confirmed this. His first son had always loved magic, but Lode stopped studying halfway. Sir Reborn asked why. So Sir Gilliard explained, his son had given up on magic because Lode believes he must become the next head of the family for the sake of his mother. Because magic is of little value to the Vermouth family, the father still hopes that his son would be able to walk the arcane path. If Iode still had an interest in magic, the boy wouldn't turn down the opportunity to become the apprentice of the Red Tower Master. Sir Reborn couldn't promise that, but he was willing to bring Iode to his acquaintances. And if the boy's potential was still lacking, Sir Reborn could not make Iode his apprentice. Sir Gilliard certainly had no intention of forcing his son. Sir Gilliard told him that his son admired the ytmanhwa compared to its own ancestor Vermouth. Sir Reborn was touched to hear that because in the story from Vermouth the hero, this young man even really idolizes the ytmanhwa because every time the team is in danger, the girl will appear with new extraordinary magic. Sir Gilliard smiled fondly at the memory of the story. In fact, Sir Gilliard's favorite character in the story was neither Ytmanhwa nor Vermouth, but just as the family leader wanted to explain who his favorite character was, he suddenly exclaimed, shocked at the scene in front of him. Apparently, they saw Eugene, finally going to face the enormous goblin. The boy looked perfectly calm, even though the goblin swung his arm in preparation to strike him quickly. The boy managed to avoid the opponent's attack and immediately counter-attacked. Eugene strikes everywhere on monster and Sir Reborn even went so far as to ask who this amazing boy is. Patriarch even frozen. When the boy finally defeated the goblin with his courage and composure, Eugene's name kept ringing in the head of the main house of the leader. Eugene Lionheart stepped calmly, leaving the goblin monster that had finally disappeared. The boys completely amazed Sir Reborn and Patriarch. Even Sir Gilliard thought the boy was too impressive for a 13-year-old with no experience, because instead of being frozen in fear, Eugene instead calmly finishes off his opponent. Sir Reborn comments that the troll should have been prepared for a trap, so kids don't need to beat it, just go through it. He didn't expect that there would be a child who could defeat him so easily. The two of them considered a child who was born with such astonishing talented. They are remembering a genius like him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, Gargus seemed overwhelmed by the troll monsters. He was even thrown away with just one punch from the monster, his body covered in wounds. Gargus is still trying hard to beat the big monster. He ran as hard as he could to slash the monster's leg, Then after the monster felt Garges struck him, right in the chest until the monster screamed in pain and then lost, Garges shouted at the top of his lungs. After finally defeating the troll monster, as soon as it was defeated, the monster immediately disappeared until Garges fell at this point. Garges thought that he could injure his pride muscle and break his ribs. He was even caught in a trap, until his body was covered in wounds and blood stains, while dragging his big sword. This boy thought the other kids would not be able to get through all of this without getting hurt. In the end Garges has fainted from being too tired and was injured. Turning to Cyan, the boy looked panic when he saw a huge troll blocking his path, but quickly, the boy realized the huge monster was not for them to beat, so he threw a rock, big enough to the other side of the room, to get the monster's attention. Then he dashed out from behind the roll's back and managed to dodge some easily. When Cyan managed to escape, he suddenly met Seal's innocent face. They were both surprised to meet, even though they entered from different paths. Cyan explained, that meant they are almost at the end point. Cyan advises Seal to always be together, so that she is always safe and not lost. This time Cyan was determined to improve his reputation in front of his younger sister, because Eugene had previously made fun of him in front of Seal. As the two of them were walking, the younger sister asked that in that illusory labyrinth any kind of monster appear could fear you. Even ghost can't scare you. But Cyan tried to calm his sister and said, if there was a ghost then the older brother would protect Seal. A second later, a hideous figure appeared in the alley closest to them. Instantly Cyan screamed in fear, at the sight of that shadow. Likewise the bloody figure, who turned out to be Descendant, also screamed in surprise, while Seal just smiled in the middle of them. Cyan accuses Descendant of scaring him, but Descendant says Cyan is even scarier. Cyan asked whose blood-covered part of Descendant's face. The girl replied that it was her blood because she was caught in a trap. Realizing that there are other competitors, Descendant wants to run, but she was even accused by Seal of going to run away. Cyan was getting annoyed because this thing looked like an idiot in front of the little sister. So, the two of them ran after Descendant. Feeling pressured, Descendant wondered where the battle lover Garges. Apparently, the young man was still unconscious. As a result, Descendant had to keep running away from the twins. While running, Descendant unknowingly triggers a trap. She ran as fast as she could, until she finally reached the end. Cyan panicked a bit when he saw the floor collapse in the distance. The opposite floors was quite large. He didn't want to go around it because he didn't want to look stupid in front of his younger sister, because he felt he had no choice. Cyan used mana energy. With the help of this energy, Cyan can jump that far. Then Cyan asked Seal to jump and catch her, but swiftly Seal jumped on her own and landed more smoothly next to her brother. Cyan was astonished, but he still praised his little sister. The two of them continue their chase until they finally arrive middle of the labyrinth. They act shocked seeing a very tall buffalo monster. This apparently is the boss monster in the labyrinth. Suddenly Eugene was standing beside the entrance, asking why the three of them could enter together. Cyan is shocked and asks why Eugene is still there. Eugene casually answered, he deliberately waited for who would reach the middle of the labyrinth first, after himself of course, and Cyan wonders why Eugene waited for the first one to come. Seal said that Eugene came first. Even Descendant was surprised to see Eugene waiting for them compared to reaching the middle of the maze of alone. So this girl was asking if Eugene accepted the cooperation proposal offered by her and Garges earlier. Eugene replied that it was not like that, he just wanted to give the upper hand to the first person to come after him, because if he fights the boss monster himself, he will immediately win. If he did that, it would be too pitiful for those who had worked so hard to come this far. You would knew this boss monster wouldn't attack if the participants were within a certain distance from it. So the monster will always be on alert. Then Eugene pointed in the order of those who came after him to fight the boss. The first is Descendant, second Cyan, and then Seal. Such as the fair order. According to Eugene, Descendant seemed doubtful if she had to fight the monster alone. Eugene advised the girl to just give up, considering her body was covered in wounds after going around the labyrinth, but Descendant refused to give up. Descendant ripped a few of her clothes to make a headband to hold her wound. Then the girl came forward to fight the monsters at this time. Cyan asked if Eugene wouldn't fight. Eugene replies, he will fight after everyone's turn is over. Cyan deals by boasting that Eugene's turn will never come since he will be the one to defeat the monster. Eugene smiled mockingly and said if Cyan managed to defeat the monster, then he was willing to call Cyan eldest brother forever. Cyan was stunned to hear that. He asks Eugene to keep the promise. Finally Cyan, Seal, and Eugene sat waiting near the entrance. Cyan knew that the monster was named Minotaur, an unforgettable monster when it comes to labyrinths. Cyan just realized that the monster was bigger than the previous troll. But according to him, this monster only excels in size because the Minotaur isn't actually aggressive. So Cyan was confident that he could defeat the monster alone. The Minotaur has large eyes opened as Descendant got near her. This girl was stunned to realize that the monster in front of her was so big from a close look. She tried not to flinch, attack the monster first. As this hour advanced, the Minotaur is nearly stepped on her. Luckily Descendant managed to dodge in time, then he spun around. Descendant attacked the monster right at its feet. But it was strange when the sharp tip of her spear couldn't penetrate the monster's skin. Descendant was very surprised to see the monster's skin, which was so thick that the spear could not penetrate. Suddenly, the Minotaur is caught Descendant in his big hand and then threw the girls, so that she flew away towards the exit. Seeing this, Seal asked Eugene why the monster end of the fight by throwing instead of continuing to beat. Eugene answered that it wasn't a real monster, so caught in his grasp mean to defeat. Now, it's Cyan's turn to go up against the monster. He glanced at Eugene and said he would show the strength of the main bloodline, which was clearly different from the power of the auxiliary bloodline. Eugene only replied with a mocking smile that grew wider. Seeing that, Cyan grew even more irritated. He demonstrated his strength by changing mana energy into the sword and turning it solid. That's the skill Sword Sky, from which it can cut anything. Descendant, who saw the skill, was surprised, because generally, it takes 10 years for mana to train. She was irritated because the gap between the branch bloodline and the main bloodline was indeed that far. Eugene himself also thought that the skill was pretty decent for a kid, it's that age, but suddenly the mana from the sword had disappeared. Cyan was surprised to see this. Eugene remembered leader words that he wanted to see the qualities of all children in a fair way. So, Eugene deduces that this labyrinth was created by Reborn, so that children could not use mana to attack the center of the maze. So, if the children can't use mana to create swords, kind that no matter if it's from the main bloodline or the auxiliary bloodline, you will fight on equal terms. Cyan was still panicking because his mana sword suddenly disappeared, even though she still had a lot of mana. Eugene says to the boy if he's going to lose, it's better to just back off. Do not be defeated because of stubbornness. Cyan certainly refused to admit defeat in front of Eugene and his little sister. He will be embarrassed. So he was determined to defeat the monster even though he didn't have mana sword. Cyan continues to run toward the Minotaur's monster. Even though the monster tried to catch it with a swift burst, it dodged and then attacked several parts of the monster's body, but failed to stop the monster. In fact, the monster was even more eager to catch Cyan. After a few moments of not being able to take the monster down, Cyan planned to attack the Minotaur's leg. However, it was blocked by the Minotaur's huge knees. It was caught off guard and he was caught by the monster. Cyan has then thrown backward until he reached the entrance. Eugene yawns him for losing so easily. Eugene turned to Seal, who had his turn after Cyan, but the little girl refused to fight monsters because she couldn't use swords mana in the middle of this labyrinth. Seal's decision makes Eugene think this little girl is smarter than her older brother. So now it's Eugene's turn to step up against the monstrous. He immediately put up his shield properly, then advanced calmly towards the Minotaur monster. Seal asks can Eugene win. Eugene calmly replies that he doesn't have confidence that he can lose. He advanced confidently toward the monster. While thinking about how to start attacking, the Minotaur monster suddenly raised its hand and attacked Eugene first. Fortunately the boy managed to dodge just fine. He instantly hopped over the arms of all the bars and climbed along. Finally Eugene arrived above the head of the minotaur because it wanted to hit Eugene, who was standing above his head. The monster even accidentally hit his own head because Eugene managed to dodge just in time, as the minotaurs threw its head back. At that time Eugene didn't waste a chance and tried to slash the monsters, though the other kids were shocked to see Eugene's attack patterns focused on monster's neck. Because the first attack failed, Eugene tried to attack for the monster's neck again. This time it hit the vein in the monster's neck, so it fell and lost. After that, Eugene approached their twin brother and showed off his victory, making Cyan even more furious. Cyan rebutted and said that, if he had sword's mana then he could defeat that monster easily, though in his heart Cyan was aware even if he used the mana sword, he would not be able to defeat the monsters as easily as Eugene did. Cyan secretly grew a sense of admiration for Eugene's figure, but he refuses to admit it. Suddenly all the monster weapons in the labyrinth room slowly disappeared. With this the children realized that the ceremony was over. Sir Gilliard smiled happily from his worth watching. He found Eugene to be amazing for defeating that monster, even though he wasn't from the main house and hadn't even trained his mana yet. Sir O'Brien confirmed it because in reality, it is difficult to defeat a minotaur alone. Actually, in this ceremony children are emphasized to work together. Sir O'Brien hoped the children would work together and use different methods, but Eugene can defeat the monsters and bypass the traps with these. Sir O'Brien wonders who the boy is. Sir Gilliard replied that it was Eugene Lionheart. He had never done anything but train hard ever since arriving at that place. Leader even sent several men to the city of Gidal, where he was born, to investigate, and Eugene's tenacity was well known there. Leader believes Eugene was born to be a fighter because Eugene has a fighting spirit. Sir O'Brien asked Gaylord wasn't worried because Eugene was more powerful than his children. With a big difference like this, the difference will be even more obvious than next time. If Eugene trains mana, Leader still has a positive attitude, and Leader says it's even more to be proud of because it means Eugene will make Lionheart's name even more famous. Sir O'Brien immediately asked the sharp question, mainly what if Eugene wanted to be the next heir and become the next head of the Lionheart family? Immediately Sir Gilliard was at a loss for words. After a while Sir Gilliard said, the position of head of the family should be held by the strongest Lionheart. If indeed his children cannot hold that position then it is Eugene, right? If they get that weak to protect their birthright, then they are unfit to lead Lionheart. Sir O'Brien apologized for feeling he had crossed the line. This young wait, then remove the tent that protected them before approaching the children. Sir O'Brien suggested to Sir Gilliard to adopt Eugene. Sir Gilliard was shocked to hear this. According to Sir O'Brien, it was disgraceful that the son of the reserve family beat the descendant of the main line. In the bloodline ceremony, it was enough to make the reserve family look down on the main family, and that can create a problem. Sir Gilliard appreciated Sir O'Brien's suggestion. It is also an attractive offer, but before that, they had to congratulate the children, who made it to the living room.